Last week, we officially started the countdown to March Madness. Now we are under 50 days to Selection Sunday, one of the hottest leagues that could have the biggest impact on the bracket, the ACC. Who's hot, who's not? We are going straight to the source today, and it all starts right now.
Ogunbowale for the win.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Happy Monday, friends. It is February 6th, 2023. I am Missy Heidrick, National Women's Basketball Correspondent here at The Next. Thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. You can follow me on Twitter at Missy Heidrick, and then I want you all to be sure to follow The Next at The Next Hoops, online at www.thenexthoops.com, and this podcast at Locked On WBB. Well, conference play is in full swing all across the country, and the ACC is delivering day in, day out, getting outstanding games and fabulous individual performances. But the big questions for me this week start with who really can win this regular season title? Who's been a surprise? Maybe who's been a disappointment? Who's in running for the Player of the Year in one of the best leagues in the nation? And what will we see when we hit the ACC postseason tournament in Greensboro, North Carolina in less than a month? Today, we are going straight to the source, and that is my colleague at The Next, Mitchell Northam. Mitchell's coverage is unmatched. He is also an AP Top 25 voter. So magically, as this week's poll drops, we're going to dissect all of that craziness as well. Hello, Mitchell. Thank you for being here, my friend. It continues to fascinate me how good the games, the matchups, the storylines, and the individual performances have been up to this point. And when I went back and looked at the schedule, there are technically only 7 true game days left in the regular season of the ACC. As you sit here today, what stands out for you? And what are we going to see here in those last 7 game days?
Yeah, I think what stands out to me is how just top to bottom, how competitive the league has been. This has been a league, probably the past 3 to 4 years, because Notre Dame was down for a little bit there, right? When Moffitt's final year, and then when she stepped away, it was a league that was really, NC State and Louisville at the top, and then kind of everybody else sort of jockeying for third place, and NC State rips off 3 ACC tournament titles in a row. Louisville goes to a Final Four. This year, it really feels like a league, as cliche as it sounds, where anybody can beat anybody. And I mean, we just saw this in the past week. Duke goes into Notre Dame and wins in South Bend for the first time. NC State gets upset on the road by Georgia Tech. UNC has their winning streak snapped by Louisville. Pitt just got an ACC win, beating Virginia. Clemson and Wake Forest have kind of surprised here and there. And then, you got Florida State and Virginia Tech and Miami near the top as well. So yeah, it's really a wide open league. Duke has finally, taken sole possession of first place with that win in Notre Dame. But there's like 6 teams that could win this league. And it's been really fun to watch, and it should make for a very interesting final month of the season. And then going into tournament time in Greensboro.
Absolutely. All right. So we talked prior at the preseason, just kind of looking at matchups, looking at teams, who could be a surprise, who might be a sleeper. I said from the get-go, and I still stand by it, I've been bullish on Notre Dame because I just have felt like there was a lot of pieces of the puzzle there for what Niele Ivey has wanted to be able to do, the type of, the system that they've run, the pace of play that they like to play at. You've obviously got one of the best point guards in the nation, Olivia Miles, and that just helps tremendously. That sometimes can compensate for other things. So talk to me a little bit with the injury situation that has happened at Notre Dame, but yet a fresh face that comes in at semester in a freshman transfer. They do lose to Duke over the weekend, but and 57-52, what strikes me is just the 52 points scored by Notre Dame. But as we sit here today, February 6th, what do you think about the Fighting Irish? What stands out to you about them?
Yeah, they've lost a couple really kind of tough games when they've gone up against sort of the other heavy hitters in this conference. They lost on the road to UNC, and that was before Darren Mabry went out. And then they lost at NC State. And then recently, yesterday, losing to Duke at home. I think they just have some things that they have to figure out with this injury situation. Darren Mabry is out for the year. We're not 100% sure, I don't think, how long Lauren Ebo is supposed to be out. So you lose a post player and you lose a guard. So they really, I think their top five that they have on their rotation right now, they feel good about. You have Olivia Miles, who, like you said, you can make the case is the best point guard in the country.
Yeah.
You have Maddie Westbeld, who is a formidable post presence and has even added a little bit of a 3-point threat this season. Sonia Citron, Kylie Watson, KK Bransford, some of these other, younger players that are sort of rising up. So I think Notre Dame just kind of has to find its way this next month and figure out how to play without Darren Mabry. And then if they need to, also figure out how to play without Lauren Ebo. And, so I don't know if that is completely adjusting, the style of play that they've been used to over the past season, or if it's just sort of maybe getting a player on the bench to step up and fill in. So I think Niele Ivey is just sort of on the fly trying to figure this out. And, she's certainly doing it in a competitive environment against, like I mentioned, some of these top ranked teams. It's like every other week they're playing a fellow top 25 opponent. So they have another month here until we get into March Madness. So I feel still good about Notre Dame as a tournament team, but they certainly have some things to figure out.
Well, and I think it just looks different. And as you said, you don't really get a night off in the ACC. And I think we have to give credit that we maybe something we don't talk about as much, but I know it's becoming more of a conversation amongst coaches is the parity that we're seeing in women's basketball. It is spreading that you are seeing that competitive nature top to bottom, especially in the Power 6 conferences. It's getting to that point. There's not true domination like maybe we would seen before. With that said, this becomes an incredibly competitive last 3 weeks of the ACC schedule. Tobacco Road, where you sit, Duke, North Carolina, NC State, becomes a pretty intriguing story because that hasn't been the case over the last few years, where all three of those teams have been as high profile as they have been. And you got Duke sitting at 10-2, 20-3 overall. They've won 2 in a row. So my first question to you about Duke is how good is this Blue Devil defense? Is it legitimate enough to help them make a run?
Yeah, I mean, they certainly have a really, really, really great defense. I was looking at some of their numbers, earlier today, and they're 6th in the nation in defensive rating. They're 8th, for opponent effective field goal percentage. They're 7th for opponent, points per play. Their defense is awesome. I don't know how many teams in the country can hold, Notre Dame to 52 points.
Exactly.
They gave North Carolina fits, even though they lost that game. They held Virginia Tech to 55. They just, when they're on the defensive end, they're really, really good. The problem for Duke has been, when their opponent scores more than 60 points. So if they can keep their opponent under that, great. Things work out for them. And when they get into a situation where, it sort of becomes like a track meet or, just a scoring fest, it's kind of hard for them to keep up. They do have some players that are capable of, generating their own offense, like a Cheyenne Day Wilson or a Celeste Taylor, but they're really at their best when they're just clicking on defense and turning turnovers into points. And that sort of thing. They're not a team that is going to outscore, get into, one of these like 70, 80, type
Yeah.
games. I'd be real interested to see sort of a strength versus strength thing, like if they ran up against Iowa or something like that.
Yeah.
When we get into March, that would be really interesting. But yeah, their defense is as good as it gets. Certainly could carry them well into March.
Well, and I look at the numbers. You said it. They lead in conference games in the ACC. They lead the league in scoring defense, 54.6 points a game.
Mhm.
But yet they're 12th in the league when it comes to scoring offense in league games, and that's 62 points a game. So as you said, if you could get people stopped, keep them under 60, stay within your comfort zone, that's a different level. You can defend at an incredibly high level, but I agree with you. Track meets, I move up and down. It becomes a little bit more difficult. Then I've got to have more weapons, more ways to score. A team that I think has weapons and can score on different levels, play different types of games, slower, faster, maybe controls pace better, has been North Carolina. But I know they're coming off a loss yesterday at Louisville. What stands out to you about that game? And I know part of it is also a really big piece of their lineup right now out for an injury that we're not sure. It seems as though no one's quite sure how long she's going to be unavailable.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that's Alyssa Usby, who has maybe, I don't know if quietly is the right word, because she was USBWA Player of the Week a couple of weeks ago, but has really kind of transformed into one of the best players in the ACC, a really great two-way player, an awesome rebounder. I mean, she does a lot of things for North Carolina. And they're, North Carolina is a team that is a little undersized. They don't really have a true center. So Utsby is so valuable on both ends on the glass, and does a lot of their inside scoring as well. And it's just a really smart and sound two-way player. So yeah, she's dealing with some sort of a lower body injury. We don't have a lot of details. Courtney Banghart was a little reluctant to give information about that yesterday. So it's unclear how long she's going to be out for. So they're sort of in the same situation as Notre Dame, where yesterday at Louisville, they were down 2 starters because Eva Hodgson is also out right now. She's dealing with some sort of upper body injury, and she's been out the past couple games. The Hodgson thing, they've been able to sort of overcome a bit because they have that depth at guard.
Yeah.
Paulina Paris has really stepped up in her absence. She's a freshman. And Kayla McPherson is healthy now. All of a sudden, she's playing some of her first minutes, and I think through her first 3 games is averaging like 11 points a game. So, they have 2 guards that have really kind of stepped up. So now they're going to have to find someone in the post to sort of step up in the absence of Utsby if she's going to be out for a little while. But yeah, I'm with you. I think, when North Carolina is fully healthy, I think they're the best team in the ACC. When they were fully healthy, they just ripped off that 8-game winning streak where they beat Notre Dame, NC State, and Duke all within that run. So they slip up on the road without 2 starters at Louisville. I think they'll figure some things out here down the stretch, hopefully get healthy. Should make for an interesting kind of finale to their season, because Duke's final 2 home games are against NC State and against North Carolina. So I think those 2 games are really going to be important for seeding for the ACC tournament, and maybe important for bracketology stuff, in terms of who gets to host. We might have two teams hosting here in the Triangle, which would be great for me. I'll have plenty of work to do. So.
Absolutely. No, that sounds fantastic. And you mentioned the other one that is part of that triangle, and that's NC State. And in just a minute, we're going to dive in. They've got a big one tonight, Monday the 6th, they host Virginia Tech. We're going to talk about those 2 teams, dive into some of the numbers, look at the stat leaders and who are the players that are making their impact in this league. But first, everybody, today we are brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. So how does Prize Picks work? Well, you go in and you pick 2 to 6 players, and if they will score more or less than their Prize Picks projections, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. No competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch. This includes the NBA, the NFL, the Super Bowl is next week, this coming up, college football, men's and women's college basketball, soccer, NASCAR, you pick it, they've got it. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. Safe and fast withdrawals, and it's currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. So go download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code, you got it, locked on. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter the promo code locked on at sign up for the instant deposit matchup to $100. Hi, everybody. I am Missy Heidrick, and thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen today. The NBA trade deadline is approaching, and Locked On has you covered. Thursday, February 9th. Tune in to Locked On NBA on YouTube at 2 p.m. Eastern to hear reactions from the trades that will change the rest of the NBA season. We know there's already a few out there. Who becomes contenders? Who is tanking for a better future? Subscribe to Locked On NBA on YouTube and do not miss a deal. All right, I am here with my friend Mitchell Northam. Mitchell, there's a big game tonight, Monday, February 6th, Virginia Tech at NC State. The other part of that triangle, I think the Wolfpack trying to find their footing a little bit, just 6-5 in this league. Virginia Tech is going to be 8-4 headed on the road. We know how good this Virginia Tech team has been, but because of the gauntlet of the schedule of the ACC, it is tough. It's tough to win on the road. My question to you, what will be the key factor of Virginia Tech getting a win at NC State tonight? Is there one thing you're looking at, something that's going to stand out?
Yeah, I'm kind of interested to see, NC State's kind of had Virginia Tech's number these past couple of years. And it's been sort of interesting. I don't know if I would call it a full-fledged rivalry, but we've had that Kitley versus Cunane thing these past couple of years. Well, now Elisa Cunane is gone. Mm-hmm. And so I'm interested to see kind of how NC State deals with Elizabeth Kitley, kind of having someone that sort of can't match her, mano a mano. So that's going to be something I'm going to look forward to. The other thing I'm looking at is just kind of how the progression of Ashley Owusu was coming along. I got the chance to talk to Kenny Brooks a little bit after they lost to Duke a couple weeks ago. And he was pointing out, Ashley Owusu comes in as a transfer. And right now, this type of season, if you have a transfers who have played the majority of the season, now you're at the point where they should be kind of fully meshed in, and you understand them and they understand you. I think NC State is seeing some of that, start to happen now. Mimi Collins, the transfer from Maryland, is playing really well. Sanaya Rivers is doing some great things also. But Owusu comes in and she plays those first couple games, and then she gets hurt and she's out, a month and a half with her hand. And so, she didn't play a ton at Duke. And hasn't played a ton really all that recently. So I'm curious to see just kind of how she progresses, because I think at the start of the season, you looked at Virginia's roster on paper and that top five, Owusu, Elizabeth Kitley, Taylor Sewell, Georgia Amor, Kayla King. That's as good as any five in the country. And they've sort of, it's been a little bit of a mismatch here and there.
Well, let me ask you this, because I pulled, as I said, in conference stats. I feel like once we get into the month of February, like we can talk about national numbers and all that, but it is so indicative of how players are, how they're doing on the floor, I think, is relation to their conference stats. Some of that comes to the matchups. I always say once you get into conference play, people are way more familiar with each other than they are in the non-con. The scouting reports are more simplistic. People understand they probably have even a better beat on players. So sometimes the numbers go down. But one of the things that was interesting to me was looking at minutes played in conference games. The top two, Georgia Amor, Elizabeth Kitley, 38 and 37 minutes a game respectively. And then in the top 15, as you just mentioned, Kayla King, she's averaging almost 33 minutes a game. So does Owusu give them the depth, more ability to have different options? Or is this just a Virginia Tech team that's going to play at home, go on the road, they go to NC State tonight, and we are just going to put out 5 or 6, and that's as deep as it goes?
Yeah, it's something that they really could use Owusu stepping up and being that player, whether it's off the bench or as a starter, because like you mentioned, they play their starters, Amor, King, Kitley, a lot of minutes, and Brooks really leans on that starting five. So, if one of them gets into foul trouble, or one of them gets hurt, that could spell for a lot of problems for Virginia Tech. So they could really use a player like Owusu to kind of step up and come into her own a little bit, and whether it's off the bench or as a starter, just play well and give some of those starters a break, whether it's just kind of taking some pressure off the ball for them from the defense, or just giving some minutes. I think that's Virginia Tech's biggest problem so far this year is the depth. They just don't have the players that Kenny Brooks trusts behind the starters right now. And so, that starting five, sure, they're still pretty solid. But when you go up against a team, NC State, they usually play, 8 players, 9 players. UNC's got some depth now. Duke has some depth. Duke plays a ton of players.
Yes.
You're going to run into some problems when you face other teams who have that depth.
Well, and as we said, 7 true ACC game days left. Mostly those are on the weekends as you head into the Thursday, Sunday schedule. No other Monday night games other than the one that is tonight, Virginia Tech at NC State. Another team I want to ask you about, because I think they have one of the most dynamic freshmen in the nation. And in a few minutes, when we start talking about who's in the running for ACC Player of the Year, I think this kid's name is going to be part of that conversation. But they've won 2 in a row. They're 9-3 in the ACC, 20-5 overall. How pleasantly surprised have you been at the success of Florida State?
Yeah, very surprised. I don't know if I said it on our preseason podcast or not, but I was kind of wondering if Florida State would have what it took to make the NCAA tournament this year. Clearly, that is not the case. To be honest, before the season started, I didn't know a ton about Tanaya Latson, but she is the real deal. She is certainly going to win ACC Rookie of the Year. She might be the best freshman in the country and win, the National Freshman of the Year award. And she's certainly probably in the running for ACC Player of the Year. She's averaging, 22 points per game. But they've had some other pieces step up as well. Michaela Simpson has been awesome for Florida State this year. Sarah, I hope I don't mess up her last name, Bajetti. Aaron Howard, Omira Gordon, like they've had these other pieces. I think Brooke Wyckoff has kind of meshed everything together pretty nicely, and they're not just a team that's gonna sneak into the tournament. I mean, they have what it takes. They could go to Greensboro in March and win the ACC. They certainly have the talent to do so.
Well, in the games that I've watched, they play incredibly hard. They're going to play at a fast pace. They are leading the ACC in scoring, 78 plus points a game. Syracuse is right behind them, but not at 71. So, I mean, that's a gap right there. I mean, this is a team that when they are on and they can score, that's a big piece of it. If you can control play and pace of play, I think that becomes important. And sometimes it's just going to be about matchups. That's what postseason conference tournaments are about. That's what the NCAA tournament's about. Do you get the right matchup? Do you get put in the right spot? And where does this team look and where do they finish? That will be interesting. So when we come back, we're going to go and run down Mitchell's take on this week's AP Top 25. He is a voter, so he gets to tell us all about what was on his magic sheet for this week. And then who else? Who else are we going to be talking about when we say ACC Player of the Year in 22-23? Are we going to be in for a surprise? All right, but first, from our friends at Built Bar. So if you're looking for a delicious treat, but you do not want all those fat and calories, then you've got to try a Built Bar. We just got through the holiday season. I know we've hit February. We all are trying to eat a little bit healthier this year. If you're like me, you want to get healthier, but you don't want to compromise that taste. So you've got to try Built. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. Seriously, they're delicious, and you will think they're good, and you won't even know that they're good for you. What makes them so good? Well, for starters, they're all covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they come in unbelievable flavors. I'm not sure how they do it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is that they're healthy. Only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around for a box. For years, we've been talking about how you've got to order them from Built Bars at Built.com. Well, now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to the nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. It will be a treat for all of you. Hi, everybody. I am Missy Heidrick. Thank you for joining us here at Locked On Women's Basketball. I'm with Mitchell Northam, who covers and blankets ACC women's basketball coverage like none else. Also, a busy week for him last week covering men's ACC action, all sorts of stories and headlines out there. But Mitchell, I want to say first, let's talk a little bit before we dive into players and maybe who you think stands out, as we've mentioned a couple names already. But anything that's going to surprise you over the last week on the national scale and impacted how you put your ballot together for this week's AP Top 25.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised to see Stanford lose, of course. And I watched LSU play and, saw them pull out that game against Texas A&M. Maryland, I was really impressed with. Maryland's coming on really strong lately. I had them in my top 5 in my ballot this week. And Villanova, they keep winning too. Really impressed with what we're seeing out of the Big East. That's a solid conference this year. But yeah, I mean, the thing that I think about every week, I think when I fill out my ballot, is just like how top heavy the Big Ten is. When you talk about Indiana, Iowa, Maryland, all right there.
Yeah.
Then you go down a little bit further and you got Michigan and Ohio State. And then the ACC as a whole, they might not be as like top heavy and dominant as the Big Ten, but I still ranked, let's see, 5 ACC teams this week. So there's definitely, there's South Carolina at the very top, but through the 25, I mean, there's a ton of parity there, and I think it's going to make for a really entertaining and compelling March.
Well, and that's the best thing, and I think that's one of the what we've all been wanting, right? That's always been the goal here, is that every single year that the NCAA tournament, even the postseason conference tournaments become more exciting, and they have so many more storylines to them just because of the parity that we start to see, and that there is talent spread out all across. Maybe not everybody's hoarding it themselves, but it's spreading out across the country and even spreading out through leagues. When we talk about individual talent, I think there's some of the very best individual players are in the ACC. We mentioned Olivia Miles. I think she's, that's All-American caliber point guard right there. May not necessarily be in the running for Player of the Year, but if you had to look at some of the women that are positioning themselves in that ACC Player of the Year discussion, who jumps to the top of your list?
Yeah, I think the conversation probably starts with the 2 players we already mentioned, Tania Latson and Olivia Miles, who have sort of carried their teams, at least on the offensive end. I think certainly the way that Duke is playing now, and I think Kara Lawson has mentioned this before this season, really the catalyst for their defense is Celeste Taylor. And she is certainly one of the best defenders in the country, and her offense has come on strong recently too. I think at Notre Dame, she had 14 points and 5 assists. So she's a player that does it on both ends, and certainly Duke would not be where they are without her. So I think you have to thrust Celeste Taylor into the conversation. I think Elizabeth Kitley is probably still up there as a contender. So that's probably the top 4. And then you could probably make an argument, for a Deja Kelly or an Alyssa Utsby too. I think that's probably the group I think the most about right now.
And I think they how their teams perform down the stretch is going to be indicative of how each one of those players perform themselves. So I think that will tell us a lot. These last 3 weeks of the regular season, I think, can spell a lot for not only the matchups that they have, the rivalries that are headed that direction, but how they perform under pressure. There is a lot to play for when you start talking about, as you said, being able to host a first and, your NCAA tournament games at home, what kind of opportunity that brings and where you position yourself in those seed lines, because then it goes down to matchups. And sometimes you can put all the scouting reports out the window, but this last month of the regular season and into the into the postseason tournaments, are driven by those top players and how their teams perform.
Yeah, for sure. And, another player who can kind of maybe play her way into this conversation is Deja Fair at Syracuse. This last month of the season is going to be really important for Syracuse. They're sort of a middle of the pack. Maybe you would call them a bubble team right now. If they play really well over the month of February and have a good showing in Greensboro at the ACC tournament, they could play their way into the NCAAs. And Fair right now is leading the ACC in scoring with 20.7 points per game. And she's played better lately. So, that's another example, I guess, of one of those transfers in a new environment kind of coming on strong lately. But yeah, it's just kind of like the conference standings, the player of the year race is pretty wide open as well.
Yeah, and as you said, Deja Fair from Syracuse, averaging almost 21 a game, and she's leading the ACC as of today. All right, before I let you go, sir, you had the pleasure because of where you are, and we can never let a controversial, we'll just say a controversy go by without having the chance to talk about it. So to give everybody a little bit of perspective, Duke played at Florida State a week ago yesterday, Sunday, lost at Florida State, and then wait about 4 days later, Carol Lawson was in her post game, made a statement about how they believed that the wrong size of basketball had been used in the first half in the game at Florida State down in Tallahassee. They thought it was a men's basketball. She was pretty adamant about it, her staff, etc. Making statements that this would never happen in men's basketball, all of those kinds of things. Always a ripple, never probably shies away from it, but you saw it firsthand, listened to a lot of it, and give me your take on what you think and maybe what some of the ripple effects will be after this has been these statements have been made.
Yeah, so I was at the press conference. It was after the Duke versus Pitt game. Duke beat Pitt. We get through the press conference and Duke's SID asked, does anyone have any more questions for Coach? We're at the end. Nobody did. And then she said, I have something else to say. And went into this 3-minute rant of sorts about how she thought that a men's basketball was used during the first half of their game against Florida State. And then she left the podium really without, a chance for anyone to sort of follow up on what she had said. A Duke player, Cheyenne Day Wilson, came in afterwards. I asked her about it. She didn't comment. She had, my coach said everything that needs to be said about that sort of thing, which was fine. And then the next day, the ACC puts out a statement, which, not directly, but basically calls Carol Lawson a liar, so to speak. I mean, they said, quote, there was no evidence found to support this claim. And so I found that to be really interesting. And, I watched Carol Lawson's press conference from Notre Dame yesterday back, and no one asked her about it. That press conference was just held at Notre Dame. There wasn't a Zoom or anything for reporters based here or anything like that. Kara's going to have an availability tomorrow like she has every week. I'm curious to see if she wants to tack anything on to what she's already said. The interesting thing about this is really there's been no hard evidence shown either way, from the ACC Florida State side or from the Duke side. I haven't seen any, side-by-side pictures of the basketballs. I haven't seen any video or anything like that. It's basically Carol Lawson's word against the ACC's at this point. It's a pretty strange story. And after that Florida State game, Carol Lawson didn't say anything in her post-game press conference then about this situation. She waited 4 days to say something after this Pitt game at home. So I wonder if she was giving the ACC a little bit of time to do this investigation and maybe give her some time to see if the result would be something that she liked. Maybe it wasn't, and that's what compelled her to say what she said on Thursday. Very strange, because usually when you see something like this happen, and you usually see a conference kind of stand by one of its, very popular and young head coaches.
Yeah.
That was not the case here. So, Carol Lawson right now doesn't have any friends in the ACC office, it seems like. I'm curious to see if this story continues, if it quietly goes away. We'll see this week.
Yeah, that's the part to me that becomes, I think, the intriguing sort of, underlying outside of basketball, sort of the pop culture concept of this. Is it going to continue to percolate? Is it going to stay there? Is it going to be, are we going to having people making snide comments about basketballs for the rest of the season? I don't know. I'm with you. I thought it was very interesting how plain and simple the ACC made their statement. When you go back and look at the numbers, ironically, within that first half of that game, Duke doesn't shoot well. Florida State shot great. Now, they were at home, so there's something to be said for that. But from my 20 plus years of experience as an analyst in radio and now in television, I sit there, I watch table crews, officials, managers, game operations folks all have that basketball there. They check it for air pressure. These are experienced officials, especially in a league like the ACC. They know how a basketball feels in their hands. Most players know how a basketball feels in their hands. I would say that Carol Lawson might not necessarily have a lot of friends right now in the ACC, and I'm pretty sure she doesn't have any friends in game operations or at the table crew at Florida State either. I'm pretty sure they're not going to be friends for a while.
Yeah, it's a really weird story. A lot of people, on Twitter and stuff have asked me, why wasn't there, more noise, I guess, made about this in the first half? There's TV timeouts and, there's a quarter change and, everything else. There was other times to do this. Kara seemed to indicate that they didn't really, make a fuss about this until halftime. I don't know why they waited. I don't know what the thought process, there was. It's a very strange story. I haven't really heard of anything like this in women's college basketball, the years that I've been covering it. And like you said, if you're, even if you're not a women's college basketball player who plays with a certain type of ball, for years and years and years,
Yeah.
Even if you're like me, who just picks up a basketball every now and then, you can tell the difference between a men's ball and a women's ball pretty much as soon as you touch it. Really, really weird and strange story. We'll see if anything else comes of it.
Well, I feel like you now are going to get an extra episode, even if you don't watch. It's going to be a little bit of ACC Days of Our Lives here. And we're going to see how long the soap opera might handle out as the rest of the regular season plays out. And then, everybody gets to go together at Greensboro on March 1st through the 5th for the tournament. So you never know what you're going to get, right?
Sure. Yeah. That'll be fun. It'll be a fun week in Greensboro for sure.
It will. All right. Mitchell Northam, the man that knows everything about the ACC. Where does everyone find you on a daily basis, my friend?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Primetime Mitch, and you can read me at The Next and at WUNC.org, and sometimes at the AP.
Awesome. Well, the votes are coming out. The polls are dropping. The ACC is on fire, and that's what we have got for you today. So thank you, Mitchell, for being here. I really do appreciate it. You can find me at Missy Heidrick on Twitter, and then all of my amazing colleagues. Make sure to go see us at The Next and follow this podcast at Locked On WBB. Please join me back here on Mondays. We talk everything about college hoops, but come back all this week to Locked On Women's Basketball for more episodes, more college basketball news and notes, all of the happenings in the WNBA and international basketball. We've got you covered. Thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen today. Now make your second listen Game to Game NBA. Every moment, every top performance, every result, Locked On Game to Game NBA covers every game from across your local area with analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game NBA on the Locked On Network, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, everybody, we will see you next week right here at Locked On Women's Basketball. Come back all this week for more episodes. Great basketball to be played. We are on the home stretch. March Madness is coming soon. Thank you.